Welcome to the Round Table. I'm Kloyd.
I'm Shayne.
Yeah, it's really an honor to have Professor Deng Yiheng to join our conversation today. To run an English podcast, we always need to pay a lot of attention on the language, especially as non-native speakers. And the problem we encountered are more than practicing fluent oral expression. And we have mouth actually carries more information than we expected. So talking about language and its subgenre dialects, before we straight into our discussion, we would like to raise a really interesting case which has grabbed our attention recently, and I'm sure you heard about that. The famous Hong Kong singer Eason has held his concert in Macau, but a small incident has generated heated discussion on the internet. A passionate audience shouted and asked him loudly to speak Mandarin during the concert, but Eason refused to do that because he thought it's rude to ask like that, and he has the right to speak whatever language or dialect he wants. Especially in Macau, he spoke Cantonese naturally. And people on the internet had made great discussion on Eason's attitude, his response, and also what we are going to discuss today, the dialect. For me and Shayne, it's really related to us because we are from Macau and we are native Cantonese speaker. In order not to make these issues too serious, I want to mention my own experience to prove it is not something new or unexpected. I mean, it's natural. When I was growing up, as I mentioned, I am a Cantonese speaker. Most of my classmates, they refused to speak Cantonese with me because my Cantonese is not the local one to them. My Cantonese is more similar to Guangzhou accents, but they have a local one. So they reported directly that my accents sound weird to them and they refuse to have conversation in Cantonese with me. And what's more interesting is when I speak Mandarin, people usually think I can't speak Cantonese because I don't have the particular accents belongs to Cantonese speaker. I have accents sounds more standard. People usually think I can't speak Cantonese for sure because the accent is not typical for them.
Yeah, like to me, because I was born and raised in Macau, so when I first came to Shanghai for university, people would know that I'm from Macau or I speak Cantonese, judged by my accent in Mandarin, which is the totally opposite to Kloyd. When I speak Mandarin here, people will sometimes say that I pronounce something wrongly, or they say that it's incorrect to say something like that, or we don't have the expressions like that. So it really, like I can't have a very deep or good communication with my classmates sometimes. And when I was maybe hanging out with my Macau friends, when we are speaking Cantonese, and they would ask us to stop sometimes, because maybe sometimes they are a part of our conversations, or sometimes they are not, but they can't understand what we are talking. So they would try to ask us to stop speaking Cantonese and to speak in Mandarin so that they can understand and to join our conversations. I mean, as a Cantonese speaker, I wouldn't force people to stop saying Mandarin and to start speaking Cantonese, even if in Macau, where a lot of people nowadays are speaking Mandarin, especially teenagers who come to Macau for high school and to proceed a higher education in Macau. I mean, it's a different attitude when I was in home and when I actually been into the mainland China. So I think we can discuss it later about the attitude here and the attitude in Cantonese speaker areas. Yeah,
it is so good to hear from both of you who are the native Cantonese speakers, even though Cantonese is a dialect rather than a language. But dialects are not created equal because I was born in Sichuan, and my native dialect is Sichuan dialect, which is very similar to Mandarin. And if I speak slowly, you can actually tell what I'm speaking.
Yeah.
So that's a different story for me to speak Mandarin and for you to pick up Mandarin, right? It's easier for me to speak Mandarin than you. And, I was surprised to hear that you have encountered so many problems people would ask you not to speak Cantonese actually, because they cannot understand you, or people think you have a different accent of Cantonese. Actually, Cantonese have different subtypes, right?
Yeah.
And they would refuse to talk to you because you have a different accent of Cantonese, and that's something only insiders can give. So I found that's very interesting. There's a recent example of the Shanghai dialect using in the translation of the Xu Jiahui library. They actually use the English Zigawei. It's more, I don't know how to speak Shanghainese, so directly spelling from the English is Zigawei. So spelled Zikawei. This aroused some controversy, right? That. So people would say, why would you use a Shanghainese translation instead of using just the pinyin for Xu Jiahui, right? I could understand some people's argument. It's more like they are arguing we are now a modern society. Why would you use the old timers expression? But in fact, Xu Jiahui library has a very long history. That's, the translation of it actually give us some idea that there's a long history behind the library rather than it's a newly opened.
Yes, I think from our example, I always see that people have natural sensitivity to language or to dialects. Especially for me, when my friend reject to speak Cantonese with me, but I felt that I was excluded from a cultural group. It is a more local one. And I think we can retrospect this affair in another way. Like when you imagine you are a traveler, you want to go somewhere else to experience different culture. You want to get more traditional ones to get to the bottom of it. But if you ask people to not speak their mother tongue, to not speak their dialects, I think you are trying to exclude yourself from that cultural group. And you are build a cultural barrier between you and them. So I think it's another phenomenon, like people going to different city to ask people not to speak their dialects.
Yeah, like, Macau is a tourist city, so there are tons of tourists visit our city. Maybe I should say every day. Like every day you will encounter a lot of people from all around the world. But sometimes, when we are encountering foreigners, we usually speak English because there's a obvious language barriers between the locals and the foreigners. But when we encounter Chinese, we are not sure if they speak Cantonese or Mandarin because we are connected with Zhuhai. So we are connected with the whole Guangdong province. So people from Guangdong province will come to Macau more often. So usually we speak Cantonese. But sometimes, recently, I say, there are a lot of visitors, they are requiring us to speak Mandarin, which... just like Kloyd said, if you want to experience the pure culture of one city, you have to get into their traditional culture, like dialects or maybe some other songs or activities. Like for me in Shanghai, I do not feel offended if people around me are saying Shanghainese because I think it's their culture, so that I have to I would even ask them to teach me. Like, I want to know what's inside your culture. I want to know how to be more like a Shanghainese, how to blend into the city. And so wherever I have time, I would go to a bus tour on Shanghai. Like, I just randomly pick a bus and then I just stay on the bus and to listen to their podcasts and to watch, along the way to see what's the real Shanghai looks like, despite of all those skyscrapers or the streets or the shopping malls, what's really inside the cities. So I think if people are trying to know what's inside city, like I have another example is when people visit Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a city which is known for being fast, like where people usually they'll ask you to leave once you finish your dishes in the cha canteen. So yeah, when people when the visitor, when going to all those restaurants, they would say that they have a bad attitude. But it's just what the city is like. It's their tradition to do that.
It's running in a fast pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard the similar things happened in Hong Kong too, when visitors request the locals to speak Mandarin with them. Rather than trying to understand Cantonese, although it's difficult as a visitor myself.
It's difficult,
I can relate to that. But on the other hand, we are visitors, right, to another culture. Do we have the open-mindedness to try to explore the city, try to pick up the local dialect, or are we just there to consume, right? I'm the boss, I have money, and you should accommodate to me. So that's a different kind of mindset, and I really like your mindset. When you go to a city, you want to know what's the real culture is like, and really grassroots culture, right?
Yes. I think it's impossible to ask people to follow every single dialect or every single language wherever they go. But I think what really matters is it's necessary to take the risk of inavailability of language or dialects.
I mean, it's like if you want the real culture there, then you should stop complaining about that. It's not saying that there are a priority of dialects or language. It's that you have to make sure that you are ready to accept all those differences in other cities, so you will not be offended.
Yeah. There's a famous saying, there's beauty and strength in diversity. We don't want to get rid of the diversity, we want to maintain them. An attitude is that, respect diversity and we try to maintain them. On the other hand, in order for a smooth communication and a more effective communication, unified official language, Mandarin, is our country's official language. So at the same time, when we are interacting with other people, while we are interacting with our hometown fellows, what kind of attitude shall we hold towards our group members?
I mean, to me, speaking Cantonese is giving me a sense of belonging, that I am the in-groups of a certain group. But to others, I'll try to, to respect others' differences, to try to have a mutual respect on both cultures, so that I will try to speak Mandarin. Even if my Mandarin is bad, I'll still communicate with you in Mandarin, because I know that I can't force you to join into my culture, neither than nor you can force me to join your culture. So I think a unified language is very necessary for people to communicate, especially like in a country like China that have a lot of population, a lot of different cultures and diversity, where people really need a unified language. But I don't think people should have, to make hierarchies on different accent, different dialects, or to think a certain kind of dialects are more superior than other kind of dialects. I think it's only a way for people to communicate, so you don't have to connect the dialects with other issues.
Yes, it's related to who I am, like why I didn't feel offended by people's rejection to speak Cantonese, because I know dialects actually signified my background. I felt I am an outsider always, but in a positive way, because I am from the Hakka community, 客家人, and so as my family, they actually are migrant worker. Why I speak Cantonese, which is similar to Guangzhou accents, because this is how they used to learn Cantonese. So I think that's really interesting. The language or dialect I said exactly presents where I come from, how I identify myself. What's more, when we named our dialects, we actually identified it, such as Cantonese, there are a lot of expressions in Chinese when we talk about Cantonese. But for most people from Macau or Hong Kong, they said Cantonese as 广东话, but not 粤语.
Yeah.
And for people like me who live in Foshan, we said Cantonese as 白话.
Yeah.
Because
That's
it's
right.
like what I said, we have identified with it when we named it.
So when do you use 广东话? When do you use 白话? When do you use...
I think 粤语 is more like written language. But
Okay.
白话, to me, like I'm born and raised in
Yeah.
Macau. Like to me, 白话 is an old saying.
Yeah.
Like for elder people, they would
Older
say,
people would
yeah,
say,
白话.
I speak 白话.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. Yeah.
Yeah, in a more traditional way, people call it 官话.
Oh.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is very traditional.
So 官话 is not Mandarin, it's actually 白话.
Like they say 广府话 or 官话.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then 广东话, when do you say 广东话?
Younger generation, like us, we say
Yeah.
广东话.
Oh, I see. So if I talk with younger generation, I would say, can you speak 广东话?
Yeah.
That would be understandable and
Yeah.
acceptable. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it's like
interesting.
it's like any of them are acceptable, but it's just it represents what generation you came from. Like people would know instantly if you say, "Do you speak 白话?" Then I would know. Oh, he or she might from the Guangdong province instead of Hong Kong or Macau.
Yeah.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Oh. So to people from Hong Kong, what should I say? Do you speak
广东话.
广东话? Oh, 广东话.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm trying to pick up some. Yeah. You know, one thing interesting is when you travel to different places, you know, for a longer time, you actually can pick up some of the, you know, daily language. And later on, when you start to, you know, when you meet someone from that area, you can start talking a little bit. Even a little bit will make, you know, the people from that area very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one benefit that we should learn some dialect whenever we can. And you actually, Shayne pointed out one interesting thing about the hierarchy of language.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Well, sometimes people would treat like big dialects. They would think that like, why are you speaking all those dialects? Are you trying to exclude people out? Like there are a sense of superiority in that dialect because they are you know like big cities, international cities. So people will think that you are trying to exclude people out because they have a lot of migrant workers like in Hong Kong, Macau, Guangzhou, or Shanghai. And the other thing I think is that because they're hard to learn, so people would lose the interest in learning it. And then they would just, you know, find an excuse to not learn it, to blame it on the native,
Local people.
to the local.
Right.
Why are you excluding us?
So there's a centralized language, like a centralized power there. You're native Shanghainese or Beijinger or local Guangzhou people, Hong Kongese. Then you feel people may think you have a sense of superiority over other, you know, people from other areas. And one thing to measure that is that you can speak very authentic local language.
Yeah.
Right. And then the people from other areas can't. Even if they pick up some, they cannot speak very standard local language. So there's a natural imbalance there. That some people speak better dialect than others. So that makes people think that, oh, you might try to show your superiority in front of me by speaking dialects.
Yeah. But I also think that it's not all the, you know, the people from outside's problem. Sometimes it's the locals' problem where they had a slight discriminative attitude towards people who can't speak the dialect properly.
Right.
Where this is
Chloe's example.
Like this exists. So it's also creating a barriers to like they are really excluding people out by doing this, but sometimes they did not recognize they are doing this.
Right, because they grow up, speaking their native dialects for their whole life. They've never been standing in other people's shoes.
Yeah.
So you felt quite excluded, huh, Chloe?
Yes, I think I'm excluded because I'm trying so hard to speak Cantonese in front of them, but they just ignore me.
They ignore you.
No,
That's bad.
they ignore me when I'm speaking Cantonese, but they still respond in Mandarin. So that's really weird. But sometimes I feel really funny. Yeah.
Now when you look back, you feel funny, but at that time you might felt
a little bit frustrated.
Right.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, because you're not you cannot get in their group.
Yes, but it's actually like when I grew up, I found that actually Cantonese has many types, or like it doesn't mean we are the same when we speak Cantonese.
That's another topic.
Yes, yes. That's why when I grow up, I have a strong identification with the Hakka community.
Right.
So I wanted to learn their dialects.
Because your grandparents are Hakka?
Yes, including my parents. It's just like me and my brother. We are raised in a whole Cantonese environment.
Yeah.
But my parents, they are still native Hakka speakers. Like they learned Cantonese in the later time.
That's why you have a mixture of dialects going on there.
Yes.
And when you were young, you didn't think about it. You thought you were excluded and you could never be an insider. But now when you look back, you should be, background is quite valuable.
Yes, that's exactly the meaning of being a Hakka. Because 客家 in Chinese is really obvious that it's a traveler, it's a guest. It just means an outsider. But for me, it gave me a new meaning that maybe I should be an individual.
You should be someone very special, right?
Yeah, I can travel to different places. Even I will feel excluded, but I will feel fine when I have the spirit of a traveler to have different adventures. And maybe that's some special meaning for me.
Right, some special meaning for people who are born a Hakka, right? My nephews and niece, they're back in Sichuan, right? Now they grew up, this generation, at the age of 6, 7. When they grew up, their parents very seldomly spoke Sichuan dialect with them. The result is that now they can only speak Mandarin. They cannot speak their own dialect. So that's a little bit sad, I should say. I don't want Sichuan dialect to disappear one day. But you still, despite the fact that your parents wanted to speak Cantonese with you, you still picked up some Hakka.
Yeah, I can see many places. Their governments or their people, they are taking care of Hakka, like in Taiwan or in Shaoguan. Many people, they are trying to protect these dialects because what's the special things about Hakka community is we are still Han people or Han nationality.
Right.
Yes, so it's hard to distinguish each other because actually we have a lot of similarity. And like nowadays I was thinking about we don't have so much difference. How can I identify myself as Hakka? So I think dialect is a really outstanding or salient way to be a person from certain community.
That's right. Yeah. So you made special effort actually learn Hakka when you grew up and then maintain that kind of identity. That kind of connection with your Hakka community.
Yes.
That's good.
Like my mother is a Hakka too. Like my mother's relatives and my mother's from Shaoguan as well. So she speak Hakka with her brothers and sisters. But I don't identify myself as a Hakka because I did not grow up in such a environment where she speak Hakka to us. She speak Cantonese to us. And because when I was born, my parents are quite old. So I don't spend a lot of time with my grandparents. Or should I say I can't spend a lot of time with my grandparents.
Yeah,
so
they have no energy to take care of you.
Yeah. So I don't have such an environment to speak Hakka. So I don't have a strong identification as Kloyd. Yeah. Even if we, our background are similar, but as I'm not learning such dialect, so I don't have such cultural identity or
right,
like
because you lost that dialect.
Yeah. So I think
you don't relate.
Yeah, I can't relate to their, but I do think the Hakka is very united. Like all the Hackers are so united. Like my mother's side, they still hang out, few weeks, and they're not just hanging out with brothers and sisters. They're hanging out with brothers and sisters and brothers and sister friends and neighbors. All the community, they hang out together every single time. So I think this is how people are connected through their cultural identity and their dialects. And
Right.
So I think we shouldn't lose our dialects, just like what you said before. Your nephews and nieces are not, learning Sichuan dialects right now. It's the same in Guangdong or in Macau and Hong Kong, where people stop learning Cantonese. So now my niece is growing up, she's 3 years old now. We didn't really speak any Mandarin in front of her.
Right.
Because she will learn it anyway. Like sometimes in the future, in the school, she will learn it.
She will learn Cantonese.
She had to learn Mandarin, so we don't speak Mandarin in front of her.
Oh, okay. You particularly want to speak Cantonese with her at home.
Yeah. To give her
good.
Such environment.
Right. So I'm glad it's good to hear that you're taking such effort to maintain the Cantonese dialect. Yeah. On the other hand, so when we are with people who don't speak our dialect, even when there's only one or two, shall we also try to respect that the only common language there was Mandarin, that we should respect his or her feelings, and we try to speak Mandarin, even when there are our own hometown fellows there, just to take care of the outsider, right? Yeah. The only person or a few people who cannot speak the dialect. And it's more effective and efficient in business. And in science, when people need to communicate, collaborate, and we speak Mandarin. And just like English is the world language, right?
Yeah.
So in China, if you want to do business in other areas, not just with people from your hometown, then Mandarin is the first choice. But we still have that need to connect with our hometown fellows, to maintain our unique identity, group identity, right? Yeah.
Yes, we have just mentioned a lot of conflict in this and a lot of solutions like learning and pick it up. So I still have another example like what Shayne has just emphasized, the environment. I was really surprised when I was in Kaohsiung, and the metro will be broadcast in Mandarin, in English, in Hakka, and in Hokkien. 闽南语. I was
so 4 languages, 4 dialects.
Yes. I think that's really matter. First, maybe I am a part of the Hakka, so I was related to it. But I think what is really matter is that we can expose to an environment when all the dialects were put in a parallel way. I don't think we are trying to impose the same importance on every dialects, because we do need Mandarin to become the most used language we communicate with each other. That really matters. I hope people can stay in such an open and generous environment when people can take every different dialects as a norm. You know, people can signify which is important and also which is the mainstream. Like Shayne just had mentioned, in those A-tier city, people might feel they are excluded because there are some issues of superiority. But at the same time, like in Shaoguan, I don't think people will feel offended when people are speaking Hakka, because they knew that this is the mainstream, and many people will speak that as their daily language.
There's no sense of superiority whatsoever.
Yes.
By
I
speaking
think
Hakka.
yes. So I think the environment is really matters.
Yeah. And I also think the attitude, you know, like to have the open-mindedness to different dialects. And, you know, as I just said, I particularly didn't speak any Mandarin in front of my niece. I think despite the individual's efforts, the whole environment should also, you know, provide some help in maintaining the dialects. As Kloyd mentioned, like metro broadcasting and others, you know,
Bus broadcasting.
or some sort of activities and some sort of
Like the
video.
airport broadcast.
Yeah, and I also, you know, staying in Shanghai for some while, and I noticed that there are Shanghainese stand-up nowadays, so that you can really to get into their dialectical environment and to learn it. And I think that is a very critical way to protect a dialect, is to use it in a daily life. Is to not having any bias toward a dialect, to accept that there can, or to say a mainstream language and a dialect can coexist together harmonically. And I think that's the attitude that we should have.
Right. Well, I just thought of an example. On the bus coming here on campus, the driver talked with me in Shanghainese. Of course, I couldn't understand that. He was telling me that my facial mask dropped on dropped on the floor on the bus, and I couldn't understand him. And he spoke out again, and I realized, because he was pointing at my mask, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. My Shanghainese is still." You know, I'm still picking up with my Shanghainese and catching up, right? And she said, oh, I should speak Mandarin. I said, no, you should speak Shanghainese. I should learn from you. And I think that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I mean, people are considerate with each other. We think that, I mean, we don't feel offended at all. We don't think you should speak certain and certain, but we take it for granted that we take you as yourself, right? As who you are. I think that probably, you know.
Yes.
And thanks for YouTube to propose this topic. That made me think, twice, or more. That what kind of attitude I should have.
Yes, I think that's a really interesting case, because today what we are talking about, I think we are not going to promised like everyone speaking Cantonese is kind, is generous. I think we are not trying to defend in this way, but we are trying to set language and dialect is not the thing we should blame. Right? In such a way, I think we can wrap up our conversation by how Eason has dealt with his own affair. First, he apologized because he thought he didn't meet everyone's expectations, or he didn't take care of everyone's feeling, and I feel that's fine. And the second thing is which is really related to what we are talking about these days. the concerts he just held in Shanghai. He just mentioned openly and directly with his fans, like, if you want me to speak Cantonese, actually I can do that. Like, eventually we found that his fans actually are really passionate to his speaking Cantonese.
Really?
Yes. Actually, people are generous about that, and people feel they have interest and they are passionate to it. His solution is really inspiring. What we should do with those dialect issues is we can discuss it. We can talk about it, especially with people who are surround us. Like, Professor, you have just mentioned you have talked to the driver. People are not what we think by those dialects. We should literally talk with them.
You always have to take the first step, so that everyone take a first step, then it would be a big step. Then everyone can, to have a mutual respect and understanding towards each other cultural background and to understand each other better, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
感谢您的收听。如果你还想了解更多节目内容和后续发布，欢迎在小宇宙、喜马拉雅、微信公众平台上搜索“借题发挥 Podcast”。希望你会喜欢我们的内容。